The CEO stopped laughing when he heard the small voice echo perfectly in Mandarin throughout the meeting room. The janitor's daughter, just 7 years old, was translating word for word the conversation that had stymied the $50 million deal. The Chinese executives, who seconds before had been getting up to leave, now stared open-mouthed at this child who mastered their language better than any professional interpreter. Silence fell on the 40th floor as she continued speaking fluently in Japanese, then German, then Arabic, but no one could have imagined what would come next. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The polished marble floors of Sterling Global Corporation gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as 7-year-old Sofia Martinez sat cross-legged in the corner of the executive waiting area, her worn sneakers barely touching the ground from the oversized leather chair. Her dark eyes traced the patterns in her coloring book while the sounds of expensive shoes clicked past her, like a metronome of indifference. "Miguel!" The sharp voice of Richard Blackwood, CEO of Sterling Global, cut through the hushed atmosphere like a blade. "These coffee stains on my desk are unacceptable." "Desk? What kind of operation are you running here?" Sofia looked up to see her father, Miguel Martinez, approaching with his cleaning cart, his weathered hands gripping the handle with quiet dignity. At 45, Miguel's gentle eyes held stories that no one in this gleaming tower would ever bother to hear. His accent, thick with the warmth of his native Colombia, had become a source of mockery among the executives who barely acknowledged his existence. "I apologize, Mr. Blackwood," Miguel said softly, his voice carrying the careful cadence of a man who had learned to make himself small in spaces where he wasn't wanted. "I will clean it immediately." Richard waved dismissively, his platinum watch catching the light as he gestured toward the boardroom. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again. We have the Japanese delegation arriving in 20 minutes, and I can't have this place looking like a subway station." Sofia watched her father's shoulders sag just slightly, a movement so subtle that only someone who loved him would notice. She had seen this scene play out countless times during the after-school hours when she waited for Miguel to finish his shift. The executives treated him like furniture, useful but certainly nothing worth acknowledging as human. "Daddy works harder than any of them," she whispered to her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, adjusting his tiny red bow tie. "They just don't know how special he is." As Miguel quietly entered Richard's office with his cleaning supplies, Sofia overheard fragments of phone conversations from the nearby conference room. The voices were tense, frustrated. Something about translation problems, missed communications, and a deal worth millions that was falling apart because nobody could properly communicate with the international partners. "This is a disaster," someone muttered. "If we can't sort out these language barriers, we're looking at the biggest loss in company history." Richard emerged from his office, barely glancing at Miguel as he headed toward the conference room. "Well, figure it out. I didn't build this empire to watch it crumble because of communication issues." Sofia tilted her head, listening more intently. Through the partially open conference room door, she could hear voices speaking in what sounded like Japanese, then switching to broken English, then dissolving into frustrated silence. Her eyes lit up with recognition. She knew those patterns, those sounds, those struggles. She slipped down from her chair, clutching Mr. Peanuts tightly, and padded toward the source of the commotion. The adults were so absorbed in their crisis that none of them noticed the small figure with pigtails approaching the doorway. But what they were about to discover would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet little girl who sat in their corner and the simple janitor who had raised her to see the world in ways they never could imagine. The polished marble conference room fell into stunned silence as Sofia's small figure appeared in the doorway, her beloved stuffed elephant clutched securely under one arm. 12 executives in expensive Italian suits turned simultaneously to stare at the child who had wandered uninvited into their corporate crisis, their faces displaying a mixture of irritation, bewilderment, and barely concealed annoyance at this unexpected interruption. "Excuse me," Sophia said in perfect unaccented English, her voice clear and confident despite her diminutive size and the intimidating presence of so many powerful adults. "I couldn't help but notice you're having serious trouble communicating with your distinguished guests from Japan." Richard Blackwood's face flushed a deep crimson with embarrassment and barely contained rage. His carefully cultivated reputation for ruthless efficiency and corporate control was being threatened by the presence of a 7-year-old child in his sacred boardroom. "What in the world is this child doing here? Security! Miguel! Come get your daughter immediately and remove her from this meeting." But before Miguel could respond from across the marble hallway, where he had been dutifully polishing the brass fixtures with his usual meticulous attention to detail, Sophia stepped forward into the conference room with remarkable composure that seemed impossible for someone her age. She bowed slightly toward the Japanese delegation, her movements graceful, respectful, and displaying a cultural awareness that stunned everyone present. "Konnichiwa, watakushi wa Sophia desu. Anatagata no mondai wo kiku koto ga dekimashita," she said, her pronunciation so crisp, natural, and flawlessly accented that it sounded as if she had been born and raised in the heart of Tokyo, rather than in a small apartment in Queens. The Japanese executives looked absolutely stunned as the 7-year-old continued speaking in fluent, sophisticated Japanese, her small hands moving expressively as she explained with remarkable diplomatic skill how she had overheard their mounting difficulties and frustrations. Mr. Tanaka, the distinguished lead negotiator, leaned forward with amazement, his eyebrows raised nearly to his hairline, in complete disbelief. "Kono kodomo wa, doko de Nihongo wo oboeta no desu ka?" he asked, gesturing toward Sophia with wonder, and speaking more rapidly and enthusiastically than he had during the entire morning's failed negotiations. "My daddy taught me every single word," Sophia replied, switching back to English with a radiant smile that seemed to illuminate the entire sterile corporate environment. "He always says that language is the magical bridge between hearts, not just a collection of words. He taught me that every language carries the precious soul of its people, their history, their dreams, and their deepest emotions." The room erupted in whispers and murmurs of complete disbelief. Richard's jaw dropped as he watched his precious multi-million-dollar international deal potentially being salvaged by a child he had never given a single second thought to during her countless hours spent waiting patiently in his reception area. "This is absolutely impossible," muttered Jennifer Walsh, the head of international affairs, adjusting her expensive designer glasses nervously while her hands trembled slightly. "She's just a kid playing elaborate dress-up games. This has to be some kind of sophisticated trick or carefully rehearsed performance designed to embarrass us." Sophia tilted her head thoughtfully, considering the woman's harsh skepticism with the remarkable patience and wisdom of someone far beyond her tender years. "Would you like me to help translate everything for you? I speak Japanese, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Arabic fluently. My daddy made absolutely sure I understood that every single language carries someone's precious soul, and that truly understanding people's souls is the most important skill anyone can possibly have in this world." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening and profound. Even the usual constant hum of traffic noise from 40 floors below seemed to pause respectfully in acknowledgement of what had just been revealed to this room full of supposedly sophisticated international business professionals. Every single executive stared at this extraordinary child as if seeing her for the very first time in their lives. Mr. Tanaka began speaking rapidly in animated Japanese, his obvious excitement evident as his hands moved expressively while he explained complex contractual concerns and cultural nuances that had been completely lost in translation. Sophia listened with intense concentration, her intelligent dark eyes focused completely on his words, occasionally nodding with sophisticated understanding that seemed absolutely impossible for someone of her tender age. He says the contract terms were completely and utterly misunderstood in the English translation process, Sophia explained calmly, turning to address the room full of adults with remarkable confidence and diplomatic poise. The specific shipping routes you proposed would directly violate their sacred environmental commitments to the Tokyo Prefecture government, which could result in devastating penalties and irreparable damage to their corporate reputation throughout Japan. Richard's head spun dizzyingly as he watched this little girl effortlessly facilitate a complex international conversation that had been failing miserably for 3 exhausting, frustrating hours. His most experienced and highly paid negotiators had been going around in circles, accomplishing absolutely nothing, and now a 7-year-old child was unraveling the entire mystery in mere minutes. What exactly is he saying about these crucial environmental issues? Richard asked, leaning forward with growing amazement and desperate hope. Sophia listened carefully and intently as Mr. Tanaka explained further details, her youthful expression serious and thoughtful beyond her years. She asked him a sophisticated, clarifying question in perfect Japanese, waited patiently for his detailed response, then turned back to Richard with the gravity and diplomatic skill of a seasoned international negotiator. "They're absolutely not rejecting your business proposal at all. They actually want very much to work with Sterling Global," she explained with remarkable clarity. "If you simply reroute the shipping containers through the Northern Pacific shipping lanes and reduce the overall container frequency by exactly 15%, they can easily meet their strict sustainability requirements while still completely honoring the lucrative deal. It's actually a much better solution for everyone involved." Jennifer Walsh frantically scribbled detailed notes, her hands shaking slightly with the sudden realization of how dangerously close they had all come to complete disaster. "My God, we've been arguing passionately about completely different things this entire time. We thought they were being deliberately difficult and obstinate, but they were desperately trying to find a way to say yes to our proposal." "So desu ne," Sophia said warmly to Mr. Tanaka, who nodded vigorously and smiled at her with genuine warmth, respect, and what appeared to be deep admiration. She turned back to face the room, her young face displaying remarkable seriousness. "He also says they were genuinely impressed by your company's innovative approach and aggressive market strategy, but they absolutely need concrete assurance about the long-term partnership structure and comprehensive cultural sensitivity training for the entire American team." For the next 45 intensive minutes, Sophia served brilliantly as the crucial bridge between 2 completely different worlds, translating not merely words, but intricate cultural nuances, complex business customs, subtle diplomatic protocols, and unspoken expectations that had been completely lost in the corporate shuffle. Her small hands gestured expressively as she explained sophisticated concepts that seasoned negotiators with decades of expensive experience had completely missed or misunderstood. Miguel finally appeared in the doorway, his weathered face pale with anxiety, confusion, and growing fear. "Sophia, mi amor, you should not bother these very important people with your games and fantasies." "It's quite all right, Miguel," Richard said slowly, his voice carrying a tone of respect that Miguel had never heard before, genuine respect tinged with bewilderment and something approaching absolute awe. "Your remarkable daughter is? She's quite extraordinary, more than extraordinary, actually. She's absolutely miraculous. Mr. Tanaka stood formally and bowed deeply to Sophia, speaking in respectful, formal Japanese, with the kind of reverence and honor usually reserved for distinguished elders and respected diplomats. "He says I have the heart of a true diplomat and the wisdom of someone much older and more experienced," Sophia translated with a proud, beaming smile. "And he wants to know where I learned to speak not just with perfect grammar and pronunciation, but with such remarkable cultural sensitivity and emotional intelligence." Miguel's eyes filled with tears of pride and amazement as he watched his precious daughter shine brilliantly in a room where he had only ever been completely invisible and forgotten. That evening, Richard Blackwood sat completely alone in his luxurious corner office, staring intently at the signed contract that had nearly slipped through his fingers like precious sand. The enormously profitable deal was worth exactly $67 million, miraculously saved by a 7-year-old girl whose dedicated father he had been carelessly treating like an inconvenient piece of disposable furniture for 3 long, wasted years. The crushing weight of his unconscious prejudice and social blindness settled heavily on his shoulders as he repeatedly replayed the day's extraordinary events in his mind. How many other brilliant, talented minds had he thoughtlessly overlooked during his climb to corporate power? How many genuinely gifted people had he dismissed and ignored simply because they didn't fit his narrow, privileged definition of success and worthiness? He picked up his phone with trembling hands and dialed the HR department. "Sarah, I need absolutely everything we have on Miguel Martinez in our files. Complete employment history, all references, comprehensive background check, education records, immigration documents, literally everything we've got in his personnel file." 20 minutes later, Sarah knocked hesitantly on his door with a surprisingly thin folder, her expression puzzled and slightly concerned. "Mr. Blackwood, this is quite unusual and frankly mysterious. Miguel's file is remarkably sparse for someone who's been working faithfully with us for 3 solid years. His references check out perfectly, his work record is absolutely impeccable, but there's very little concrete information about his background before he came to America." Richard opened the folder with growing curiosity, expecting to find the typical, inspiring immigrant success story, someone working incredibly hard to build a better life for his family. Instead, he discovered puzzling fragments that didn't quite fit together logically, like pieces of a complex puzzle with crucial parts missing. There was an impressive university degree from Universidad Javeriana in Bogotá, glowing references from what appeared to be high-level government positions, and a mysterious, unexplained gap of nearly 2 years before he began working as a janitor at Sterling Global. "Get me our best private investigator immediately," Richard said quietly, his sharp business instincts telling him there was much more to this intriguing story. "I want to know exactly who Miguel Martinez really is. Full international background check, education verification, employment history, everything available." 3 days later, the shocking truth arrived in a sealed manila envelope that would completely shatter every single assumption Richard had ever made about the quiet, dignified man who had been emptying his wastepaper basket for years. Miguel wasn't just another hard-working immigrant who had fallen on difficult times. He was Dr. Miguel Antonio Martinez, former deputy ambassador to the United Nations from Colombia, fluent in 9 languages, and holder of a prestigious doctorate in international relations from Oxford University. The detailed investigative report revealed the heartbreaking truth about how Miguel had been forced to flee Colombia in 2016, when his courageous anti-corruption work and damaging testimony against powerful drug cartels had made him a marked man. Specific death threats against his young family, including explicit threats against infant Sophia, had forced him to abandon his distinguished diplomatic career and disappear completely into the protective anonymity of American blue-collar work. He's been teaching his daughter multiple languages while emptying our trash cans every night, Richard whispered to himself, the overwhelming weight of his unconscious prejudice settling on his shoulders like a crushing, unbearable burden. One of the most qualified diplomats in the entire hemisphere has been completely invisible to me for 3 years. But there was more shocking information. The investigator had discovered something else. Something extraordinary that would prove Miguel's true value extended far beyond even his impressive diplomatic credentials and would change both their lives forever in ways neither could imagine. Richard found Miguel in the small supply closet on the 38th floor, carefully organizing cleaning supplies with the same methodical precision and meticulous attention to detail he had once brought to complex international treaties and delicate diplomatic negotiations between world powers. Miguel, I need to speak with you urgently about something very important. My office, please. Miguel's weathered hands trembled slightly as he carefully set down the bottle of industrial floor cleaner he had been systematically inventorying. In 3 years of faithful, dedicated service, he had never once been invited to the CEO's intimidating office. His mind raced frantically through terrifying possibilities. Had he made some terrible, unforgivable mistake? Had someone somehow discovered his carefully hidden true identity? Was he about to lose the precious job that kept food on Sophia's table and a roof over their heads? Richard gestured respectfully to the expensive leather chair positioned across from his massive oak desk. Please, sit down and make yourself completely comfortable. The unexpected formality felt strange and deeply unsettling after years of barely acknowledged existence in the corporate hierarchy. Miguel perched nervously on the very edge of the chair, his humble work uniform feeling suddenly shabby and completely inappropriate in the opulent surroundings of executive power and privilege. I know exactly who you are, Richard said simply, his voice carrying none of its usual commanding corporate authority. The color drained completely from Miguel's weathered face. After 8 long years of careful hiding, of painstakingly building a new identity from absolutely nothing, had his dangerous past finally caught up with him. Mr. Blackwood, please, I can explain everything. Dr. Miguel Antonio Martinez, former Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations from Colombia, Oxford graduate with highest honors, and apparently one of the most qualified international relations experts on the entire East Coast. Richard slowly slid the investigator's comprehensive report across the polished desk. The question that's been keeping me awake for days is, why didn't you tell me who you really were? Miguel's shoulders sagged with the enormous weight of years of concealment, fear, and crushing loneliness. When you are running desperately for your life, Mr. Blackwood, when dangerous people want to kill your innocent baby daughter to send a brutal message, you learn very quickly that survival is infinitely more important than pride or career advancement. I needed to disappear completely from my former life. My daughter needed safety and complete anonymity more than I needed recognition or professional achievement. And you've been teaching her multiple languages while cleaning our floors every single night. Every single night after my shift ended, Miguel said softly, his voice thick with deep emotion and overwhelming love. In our small, cramped apartment, we would travel the entire world through words, stories, and imagination. I wanted her to understand that knowledge and education cannot be taken away from you, even when everything else you've worked for is lost forever. Language is true power, and I wanted desperately to give her that power. Richard stood slowly and walked to his floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling city below, where millions of people pursued their dreams and struggled for opportunity. I'm offering you the position of Director of International Relations. The salary is $300,000 annually, plus comprehensive benefits, plus a full scholarship fund for Sophia's complete education through graduate school. Miguel's breath caught painfully in his throat, and for several long moments he couldn't speak at all. "Mr. Blackwood, I honestly don't know what to say. This is beyond anything I ever dared to hope for in my wildest dreams. Say yes, and help me build the kind of company that recognizes and nurtures genuine talent regardless of where it comes from or what language it speaks first." But as Miguel processed this absolutely life-changing offer, neither man suspected that their most extraordinary discovery was yet to come. 2 weeks into his new position, Miguel had completely and dramatically transformed Sterling Global's entire international operations with remarkable efficiency and unprecedented success. Complex deals that had languished uselessly in bureaucratic limbo for months suddenly moved forward with incredible speed and profitable results. His deep, intuitive understanding of cultural nuances, sophisticated diplomatic protocol, and intricate international business customs opened doors that had remained permanently sealed to the company's previous heavy-handed approach. But it was during a late evening in his new executive office that Richard made a discovery that would fundamentally change everything he thought he knew about the man he had once dismissed as merely part of the cleaning staff. He had stopped by unexpectedly to drop off some urgent contracts for morning review and found Miguel's computer screen displaying something absolutely extraordinary. A meticulously organized digital archive containing hundreds of carefully catalogued audio files, detailed phonetic transcriptions, extensive cultural notes, and comprehensive linguistic documentation. "What exactly is this incredible project?" Richard asked, genuinely startling Miguel, who had been completely absorbed in his passionate work. Miguel's face showed a moment of panic, then weary resignation mixed with pride. He had been discovered again, but this time in a completely different way. "It is something I have been working on secretly for 8 long years, since the very first day I began working here as a night janitor." Richard leaned closer to the computer screen, fascinated by what he was seeing displayed before him. The files were meticulously labeled with names and geographic locations he didn't recognize, languages that seemed to originate from every corner of the globe, many of which he had never heard of in his life. "These are actual language recordings from real people. Not just any ordinary languages," Miguel said quietly, his voice filled with passion and deep purpose. "These are dying languages. Rare dialects spoken by immigrants who work in buildings exactly like this one, who clean offices like yours, who prepare food in restaurant kitchens, who remain completely invisible to most people in positions of power and privilege." Richard scrolled through the enormous archive, amazed by its incredible scope and meticulous organization. "You documented all of this extensive work while working as a janitor. How is that even physically possible?" "Every single night, I would seek out and meet people from my world. The people who empty trash cans, who mop floors, who wash dishes, who remain unseen and unheard. Many of them speak languages that have no written form whatsoever, ancient dialects that exist only in the memories of a few dozen elderly people scattered across America." Miguel opened one of the files with reverent care and respect. An elderly woman's voice filled the office, speaking in a hauntingly melodic language Richard had never heard before in his entire life. "This is Mrs. Chen, who cleaned the 15th floor faithfully for 6 years before she retired. She speaks a dialect from a small remote village in rural China. When she dies, this language dies with her forever unless someone takes the time to preserve it for future generations." Richard stared at the screen in growing amazement, realizing he was looking at something far more valuable than any corporate deal or profit margin. "How many languages have you actually documented?" 237 distinct languages and dialects, some spoken by only 3 or 4 people in the entire United States. I may have created the most comprehensive archive of endangered immigrant languages in North America. As the true magnitude of Miguel's secret work sank in, Richard understood that he had discovered something that would make them both far more important than they ever imagined possible. 6 months after Miguel's promotion, Sterling Global had become unrecognizable. The company's international revenue had increased by 300%, and their reputation for cultural sensitivity had attracted partnerships from 47 countries. But it was Richard's announcement during the quarterly board meeting that would change everything for countless families. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, standing before the marble conference table where Sophia had first revealed her gifts, "I'm proposing the Sterling Global Educational Excellence Program. Full scholarships for children of all our employees, regardless of position or salary." Board member Harrison Webb shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. "Richard, with all due respect, we're talking about millions of dollars. Scholarships for janitors' kids? That's not what shareholders expect from their investment." "The janitor's kids saved us $67 million, Richard replied sharply. "How many other brilliant minds are we overlooking because of our prejudice?" Sophia, now 8 years old and spending her afternoons in the newly created Young Scholars Corner of Miguel's office, looked up from her advanced mathematics textbook. She had been quietly absorbing every word of the heated discussion through the intercom system. "Daddy," she whispered in Spanish, "they don't understand that intelligence doesn't care about job titles, do they?" Miguel smiled proudly at his daughter, who was now reading at a college level in 7 languages. "No, mi amor, but they're learning. Sometimes change comes slowly to people who have never needed to change before." The board vote was scheduled for the following week, but rumors had already begun circulating throughout the building. Some executives whispered that Richard had lost his mind, throwing money at undeserving families. Others quietly wondered if their own children might benefit from the expanded educational opportunities. Mrs. Rosa Gonzalez, who cleaned the executive bathrooms, heard about the program from her supervisor. That evening, she called her teenage son, Carlos, who had been working 2 jobs to afford community college. "Mijo," she said, her voice trembling with hope, "there might be a way for you to finish your engineering degree after all." But not everyone was celebrating. Harrison Webb had been making private calls to major shareholders, questioning Richard's leadership and financial decisions. His plan was more sinister than anyone realized, and it would soon threaten everything Miguel and Sophia had helped build. As the vote approached, tensions within Sterling Global reached a breaking point. The company that had once been united by profit was now divided by principle, and the battle lines were being drawn around a simple question. Did everyone deserve a chance to succeed, regardless of where they started? The answer would determine not just the fate of the scholarship program, but the very soul of Sterling Global itself. And waiting in the shadows was a betrayal that no one saw coming. The boardroom erupted into chaos as Harrison Webb slammed his fist on the polished table. "This is corporate suicide. We're a business, not a charity. Richard, your emotional decision-making is destroying shareholder value." Richard remained calm, but his knuckles were white as he gripped his presentation materials. "The scholarship program will cost us $12 million annually. Our increased international revenue, thanks to Miguel's expertise, has brought in over $200 million this year alone. The math is simple, Harrison." "The math is irrelevant," Webb shot back, his face red with fury. "You're setting a dangerous precedent. Next, you'll be giving company cars to custodians and health insurance to part-time workers. Where does it end?" Sophia sat in her father's office, but every word carried through the building's intercom system. She had been learning to read corporate financial reports, and her mathematical mind quickly processed the numbers being discussed. "Daddy," she said quietly, "Mr. Webb is wrong about the money. I calculated it myself. The scholarship program would cost less than Mr. Webb's executive bonus package." Miguel looked at his daughter with amazement. At 8 years old, she was analyzing corporate budgets with the skill of a seasoned accountant. "How did you learn to read those reports, mi amor?" "I asked Mrs. Patterson, in accounting, to teach me. She said I have a gift for numbers, just like I do for languages. She's been showing me how companies really work, not just the pretty presentations, but the real money movements." Meanwhile, Webb was orchestrating something far more dangerous than a simple board vote. He had been secretly meeting with Sterling Global's biggest competitor, Hartman Industries, offering to sell them internal information about Miguel's revolutionary international strategies in exchange for a position as their new CEO. "The Martinez man has too much influence over Richard," Webb told Hartman's executives during a clandestine meeting in a downtown restaurant. "He's turned our company into some kind of social experiment, but I can deliver you their entire international client list and Miguel's negotiation strategies for the right price." What Webb didn't know was that Maria Santos, who cleaned the restaurant's private dining rooms, spoke fluent English despite pretending otherwise. She had overheard every word of his treacherous plan, and she knew exactly who needed to hear this information. That evening, Maria made a phone call that would change everything. "Dr. Martinez? This is Maria Santos. I clean at Romano's restaurant downtown. I have something very important to tell you about Mr. Webb." As Miguel listened to Maria's report, his diplomatic instincts kicked in. He had dealt with corporate espionage before during his UN days, but this betrayal cut deeper because it threatened not just business deals, but the future of every working family at Sterling Global. "Thank you, Maria," Miguel said gravely. "You may have saved more than you know." The next morning, Miguel faced an impossible choice: expose Webb's treachery and risk destabilizing the company, or stay silent and watch as everything they had built was sold to the highest bidder. But he had underestimated his 8-year-old daughter, who had been listening to every conversation and was already formulating a plan that would shock everyone involved. Sofia Martinez had been awake most of the night, her brilliant young mind processing the implications of Harrison Webb's betrayal. At 8 years old, she understood corporate politics better than most MBA graduates, and she had developed a plan that would protect everything her father had worked to build. "Daddy," she said the next morning, her voice carrying a maturity that sometimes startled Miguel, "I need you to teach me about something called insider trading and corporate espionage laws." Miguel looked up from his morning coffee, concerned. "Sophia, those are very serious topics. Why would you need to know about such things?" "Because Mr. Webb is breaking both laws, and I want to make sure we stop him the right way, the legal way that protects everyone at Sterling Global." For the next hour, Sophia asked questions that would have impressed law school professors. She wanted to understand SEC regulations, corporate governance requirements, and the specific legal remedies available when board members violated their fiduciary duties. "If Mr. Webb is selling company secrets to Hartman Industries," she reasoned aloud, "then he's stealing from every employee here, Mrs. Rosa's son Carlos, Mrs. Chen before she retired, even Mr. Blackwood. Everyone loses if our company fails." Miguel watched his daughter with amazement and growing concern. She was brilliant beyond measure, but she was still a child carrying adult responsibilities on her small shoulders. "Mi amor, perhaps this is something the adults should handle." "The adults don't see what I see," Sophia interrupted gently. "They think in straight lines. But I speak 7 languages, Daddy. I understand how people think in different ways, how to solve problems from angles that others miss." That afternoon, while Miguel was in meetings, Sophia took an unprecedented step. She requested a private meeting with Richard Blackwood, composing a formal business letter that demonstrated writing skills far beyond her years. "Mr. Blackwood," she wrote, "I have information about a serious threat to Sterling Global that requires immediate attention. As a stakeholder in this company's future, and as someone who cares about all the families who work here, I believe I can help solve this problem. Please give me 15 minutes of your time." When Richard received the letter, he was stunned. The vocabulary, the formal business structure, the sophisticated reasoning, it could have been written by a senior executive, but the careful, precise handwriting belonged unmistakably to an 8-year-old girl. That evening, Richard sat across from Sophia in his office, feeling as if he were negotiating with a colleague rather than speaking to a child. "Mr. Blackwood," Sophia began, her small hands folded professionally on the desk, "Mr. Webb is planning to destroy our company from the inside. But if we're smart about how we handle this, we can turn his betrayal into our greatest opportunity." Richard leaned forward, captivated. "What do you mean, Sophia?" "We let him think he's winning," she said with a smile that was both innocent and incredibly shrewd. "We give him exactly what he wants to take to Hartman Industries. But we make sure that what he steals isn't actually valuable. It's a trap that will expose him and protect our real secrets." As Sophia outlined her strategy, Richard realized he was listening to one of the most sophisticated corporate counterintelligence plans he had ever heard. And it was coming from a third grader who still carried a stuffed elephant and loved bedtime stories. "Sophia," he said quietly, "where did you learn to think like this?" "From watching people, Mr. Blackwood. When you're small and quiet, adults forget you're there. You see everything, hear everything, and learn how the world really works." The plan they developed over the next 2 hours would not only expose Webb's treachery, but would ultimately lead to changes that neither of them could have imagined. 3 weeks later, Harrison Webb believed he was about to execute the corporate coup of his career. He had convinced 3 other board members to join his revolt against Richard's leadership, and he had promised Hartman Industries a complete package of Sterling Global's most sensitive information in exchange for a $50 million golden parachute and the CEO position at their rival company. What Webb didn't know was that every document he had been secretly copying, every strategy he had been photographing, and every client list he had been memorizing had been carefully crafted by Sophia and Miguel, working together with Richard's full knowledge and approval. "The beauty of this plan," Sophia had explained during one of their late-night strategy sessions, "is that Mr. Webb's greed will be his downfall. He won't be able to resist taking what he thinks is our most valuable information." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Miguel had created a fake international expansion strategy that appeared to be worth hundreds of millions, but was actually designed to fail spectacularly. The client lists Webb was stealing contained the names of fictitious companies created specifically for this operation. Even the financial projections had been carefully manipulated to look promising while concealing fatal flaws that would become obvious only after implementation. On the morning of the crucial board meeting, Webb strutted into the Sterling Global boardroom with supreme confidence. He had already sent the stolen information to Hartman Industries and had received confirmation of his new position as their CEO, effective immediately after Sterling Global's board voted him into power. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb announced with theatrical flourish, "I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in Richard Blackwood's leadership. His reckless spending on social programs and his misguided trust in unqualified personnel have jeopardized our company's future." Richard stood calmly and activated the room's large presentation screen. "Before we vote, Harrison, I think the board should see something interesting. Lee, The screen displayed a video conference connection to FBI agent Sarah Chen, who appeared to be calling from a federal courthouse. "Good morning, everyone. Mr. Webb, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and violation of SEC regulations regarding insider trading." Webb's face went white as security officers entered the boardroom. "This is impossible. You can't prove anything." "Actually," Agent Chen continued, "we have recorded phone conversations, photographed documents, email communications, and financial records showing your arrangement with Hartman Industries. We also have testimony from multiple witnesses who observed your activities." But the most devastating blow came when Sophia herself appeared on the screen via video link from Miguel's office, her 8-year-old face serious but composed. "Mr. Webb," she said in her clear, confident voice, "every document you stole was fake. Every strategy you sold to Hartman Industries was designed to fail. You didn't just betray Sterling Global, you helped us prove that you were never worthy of the trust this company placed in you." As federal agents led Webb away in handcuffs, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed an 8-year-old girl orchestrate one of the most sophisticated corporate counterintelligence operations in business history. But the real shock came when Richard made his next announcement. "Effective immediately, I'm restructuring Sterling Global's leadership. Miguel Martinez will become our new Chief Operating Officer, and we're establishing a new position, Director of Strategic Innovation, with our youngest and most brilliant consultant leading our long-term planning initiatives." Every eye in the room turned toward the video screen where Sophia Martinez smiled with quiet confidence, not yet knowing that this moment would be remembered as the beginning of her unprecedented rise to corporate leadership. The 8-year-old had just saved a billion-dollar company, but her greatest achievements were still to come. 2 years had passed since the Webb incident, and Sterling Global had become the most admired company in international business. At 10 years old, Sophia Martinez was already being featured in business magazines as the young visionary who changed corporate America. But fame had not changed her. She still carried Mr. Peanuts to important meetings and insisted on doing her regular homework before reviewing quarterly financial reports. Miguel watched with pride and amazement as his daughter effortlessly switched between being a normal 10-year-old who loved cartoons and ice cream and a business strategist whose insights had helped Sterling Global expand into 73 countries. The scholarship program she had helped design had already sent over 300 employees' children to college, creating a pipeline of talent that was revolutionizing the company from within. "Daddy," Sophia said one evening as they walked through the Sterling Global building after hours, "I've been thinking about something important." "What's that, mi amor?" "All the languages you've been recording and preserving, they're not just sounds and words, they're entire worlds of knowledge that are disappearing forever. What if we could do something bigger with your archive?" Miguel paused in the hallway, looking at his daughter with curiosity. In the past 2 years, Sophia had learned to think on a scale that amazed even him. Her ideas had already transformed Sterling Global's approach to international business, but he sensed she was about to propose something even more ambitious. "What do you have in mind? What if we didn't just preserve these languages, but created a way for them to survive and grow? What if Sterling Global became the world's center for linguistic preservation and cultural education?" Over the next hour, as they sat in Miguel's office surrounded by the soft glow of computer screens displaying his linguistic archive, Sophia outlined a vision that took her father's breath away. She envisioned a global network of cultural centers, an online platform that would connect native speakers with language learners worldwide, and partnerships with universities to ensure that endangered languages would be studied, taught, and kept alive for future generations. "We could call it the Global Heritage Language Project," she said, her young eyes bright with excitement. "And every language you've preserved would become the foundation for keeping those cultures alive, not just documented." Miguel realized that his daughter was not just brilliant, she was visionary in a way that could change the world. Her plan would transform his secret 8-year project into humanity's greatest linguistic preservation effort. "But Sophia," he said gently, "such a project would require resources, international cooperation, government support." "I know," she replied, with the confidence that had become her trademark. "That's why I've already started preparing a presentation for the United Nations Cultural Preservation Committee, and I think Mr. Blackwood would be very interested in making Sterling Global the company that saves dying languages instead of just using them for business." And as Miguel looked at his 10-year-old daughter, he understood that he was witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Sophia was not just inheriting his love of languages. She was transforming it into a mission that would define her entire life. But neither of them knew that in just 7 years, this same brilliant girl would make history as the youngest CEO in corporate America, or that her father's simple archive would eventually be recognized by UNESCO as humanity's most important linguistic treasure. The foundation for greatness had been laid in the quiet moments between a father and daughter who refused to let the world's voices be silenced forever. 7 years later, the Sterling Global boardroom buzzed with anticipation as shareholders gathered for the most unprecedented announcement in corporate history. At 17 years old, Sofia Martinez was about to become the youngest CEO in the history of American business, but that wasn't even the most extraordinary news of the day. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard Blackwood said, his voice thick with emotion, as he prepared to step down from the position he had held for 15 years. "Today we witness the culmination of a journey that began when a 7-year-old girl taught us that brilliance has no age limit, no social boundary, and no language barrier." Sophia stood at the head of the marble conference table, where her linguistic abilities had first been revealed a decade earlier. Now fluent in 12 languages and holding advanced degrees in international relations, business strategy, and linguistic anthropology, all earned through accelerated programs funded by Sterling Global's scholarship initiative, she embodied everything the company had become. "Before I officially assume the role of CEO," Sophia began, her voice carrying the same confidence that had amazed executives 10 years ago, "I want to share the most important achievement in Sterling Global's history. It's not about profit margins or market expansion. It's about preserving the soul of humanity itself." Miguel, now 57 and serving as the company's chief cultural officer, watched with tears in his eyes as his daughter activated the presentation screen. On it appeared a letter bearing the official seal of UNESCO. "Yesterday," Sophia announced, "my father's linguistic archive was officially designated as a UNESCO memory of the world treasure, the most comprehensive collection of endangered languages ever assembled. But more than that, the Global Heritage Language Project we launched 5 years ago has now documented over 1,200 dying languages and created learning programs that have reached 2-3 million people worldwide." The room erupted in applause, but Sophia raised her hand for silence. "The real magic isn't in the numbers, it's in the stories. Mrs. Chen's Chinese village dialect is now being taught to her great-grandchildren in California. The Zapotec language spoken by our maintenance staff has been preserved for indigenous communities in Mexico. Every night janitor, every kitchen worker, every person this industry once overlooked, their voices now echo through eternity." Richard stepped forward, his face beaming with pride. Under Sophia's leadership as Director of Strategic Innovation, Sterling Global has become the world's most profitable company while simultaneously revolutionizing corporate social responsibility. Our scholarship program has sent over 2,000 employees' children to college, with a 94% graduation rate. 60% of our current executives started as scholarship recipients. But the most stunning revelation was yet to come. "There's something else," Sophia said, her young face serious with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "For the past 3 years, we've been secretly working with the Department of Education to implement the Sterling model in schools nationwide. Starting next month, every public school in America will have access to our multilingual education platform and cultural preservation curriculum," Miguel gasped. His daughter had never mentioned this project, and suddenly he understood the scope of her vision. She hadn't just built a company. She had created a movement that would transform how America educated its children and valued its diverse communities. "Daddy," Sophia said, turning to Miguel with the same radiant smile she had worn as a 7-year-old, "you taught me that language is the bridge between hearts. Now, we're building bridges everywhere." The standing ovation lasted for 7 minutes. Shareholders who had once questioned Richard's decision to promote the janitor's daughter now understood they were witnessing the birth of a new kind of leadership, one that measured success not just in dollars, but in lives transformed and cultures preserved. As the meeting concluded and Sophia officially became CEO, she walked to the same corner where she had once sat as a small girl with her stuffed elephant, waiting for her father to finish cleaning floors. Mr. Peanut still sat on her new desk, a reminder of where she had started and how far she had come. "We did it, mi amor," Miguel whispered, embracing his daughter in the empty boardroom. "No, Daddy," Sophia replied, her voice filled with love and determination. "We're just getting started." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city hummed with millions of voices speaking hundreds of languages. And thanks to a former diplomat who became a janitor and his extraordinary daughter who refused to accept limitations, those voices would never be silenced. The little girl, who had once translated a failing business meeting, had grown up to prove that talent truly knows no boundaries, and that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or status. It's the courage to see brilliance wherever it exists, and the wisdom to nurture it without prejudice. In the end, Sterling Global's greatest acquisition wasn't a company or a technology. It was the simple truth that everyone deserves a chance to shine, regardless of where their journey begins.